Guess we'll wait a couple minutes while we wait for people to check in. One more minute. Others will probably get started. It's just okay. So it wasn't okay. In general, it was pretty bad. Now it seems like that's the audience vote over here. What did you what did everyone think like was bad about it? Like what did everyone have trouble with? Uh any any qualms, questions, concerns with homework 3? Oh yeah. Happens to the best of us. Yeah, like hopefully, like even if you didn't complete it, you still like understood like most of the concepts, and it's just like it was just a matter of time, I guess. So yeah. Next. Right. So good. We kind of remember from before how Jetpack Compose, basically every UI component is a function. And you're just going to use at composable to basically turn just a regular call in function into something where you can call and then it'll actually paint like a UI component onto it. So it's actually not red in the sense that we're moving away from XML. We're pretty much never going to use XML ever again in Jetpack Compose. Yeah, but at least we know it's not like most of the yellow or green there. Yeah, good job. Yeah, good. So if we remember from the lazy list lecture, in order to actually like enumerate the items in a lazy list, you actually have to call a function called item and then place your composable within the like the sort of the bracket here. This is like the item scope. Actually, I can even go back to the lecture here. We can see the syntax is actually pretty simple. We just declare a lazy column and it has a scope. And within that lazy column scope, you have to write items explicitly in order to sort of enumerate these like five versions of these text boxes. So yep, pretty good. And then you can also use item. So items is like for multiple, and then X is like a number that you can just pass in like the size of your list. And then item is just for a single one. Maybe like you only want one at the top or like one at the bottom. Yeah, good. So I think we all kind of saw the three composed layouts on the right there or the left. So box is basically like a composed layout where elements can stack on top of each other. Row is a composed layout where elements can go like side by side and they go like left to right. And column is one where they go vertically up and down. Yep. Frame is nothing really. I kind of took it from frame layout in the native views way of like coding an app. So yeah, it's not that one. Last question. Oh, this one's a long one. Yeah. Pretty good. So capital M modifier is the actual object that you have to use in order to basically give attributes to a composable, like change the size, you can change the color, add a clickable, sorry, like an on-click listener. Like the other ones I just came up with like synonyms for modifier. But yeah, good. All right. So hopefully that was like some pretty good review for what we learned about Jetpack Compose. You're going to be using it a lot for homework 4 and the rest of the homeworks. And hopefully we'll touch on it later, but there's going to be like a hack challenge. And if you are like the Android developer for your team, you will probably want to use Jetpack Compose for that as well. So you can really choose there, but we would recommend Jetpack Compose. All right, cool. So I'll jump into the lecture here. So for today, we're going to touch a little bit more on some Jetpack Compose, just like basics, as well as navigation and some intro to networking. So before we get started, homework 4 is out. If you guys haven't seen the ed post, it's going to be due 22nd. And let me go to ed. This is where you find it. You can click on there. That takes you to the textbook, and it has the homework 4 handout there, and it has starter code with it. Make sure to download it. Let me know if there are any problems with you running this or like otherwise building the starter code, because I know there's some issues with using it like an older Android Studio versus a newer one. So yeah, just let me know early. All right. And then the second announcement, which is important to you guys, is the hack challenge. So I'm pretty sure you guys should all be on the ed discussion for hack challenge as well. If you don't know where it is, it's this one right here is like CS Info 1998. And then here you'll get some more information about the hack challenge. And so basically, on the 19th, there's going to be a mixer to help you find like teams for the hack challenge. And so Friday at midnight, the team matching form will be due, and then we'll be like starting it on the next Monday. So yeah, just make sure to look at that ed post and just get like up to speed with that, and then just keep an eye out for the events that come. All right. We actually put back in here. Okay, so we're gonna get started with something called multiple screens. So if we haven't really touched on it before, but when we were writing in when we were writing in native Kotlin, we were using multiple activities, right? and we're using intents to navigate between them. So if you guys remember start activity, that would take us from one activity to another, and then it'd be like a different screen there. But in Jetpack Compose, there's like an increasingly popular way of writing an app where you only use one activity and you're able to navigate between the screens much more seamlessly without having to use like intents and stuff like that. So some examples here is like this eatery app here. So you can see like at the bottom, there's like this bottom tab, like bottom navigation bar, where you kind of click on these, and then like sort of intuitively, like the middle part in orange changes. And so what we're really trying to do here is have like an app architecture where we only have one activity that controls like this like bottom navigation bar, and we can just like swap out what's in the middle seamlessly without having to go through all like the start activity, like activity for result, all that kind of stuff. So how we do it, or I guess the reason why we do it is to reuse UI components. So we don't want to like copy the bottom navigation bar into every activity that we want to use. We just want to keep it in like one spot and then swap out the middle stuff. We want to also add more modularity to the app architecture. Just simply like sort of, if you see like the middle part is one step, like one concern, and then the actual navigation at the bottom is another concern. We don't want to like sort of mix and match those two. And finally, like just reduce redundancy in the code base. You don't want to like repeat yourself over and over again. And so the implementation of this is pretty simple. All we have to do is just create different composables for each of these screens. So this, like in the center here, would be something like the home screen, and then this is just the function. And then like this in the center here would be like upcoming menu screen, and it'll just be like another composable function. And then this could be like the login page, and there'll just be another composable function. And I took all those names from the actual eatery like code base, the eatery repo. So these are just like architecture decisions that we use like in day-to-day Android development. Yeah, but so we have this, right? But the problem is we don't actually have a way to navigate between them yet. So if we saw when we created a Jetpack Compose activity, let me just open like this one. When we saw here, you can see there's a set content sort of helper function here. But this will only let you set like the root of the activity, and you can only set it to like one composable. So you can only really have one screen at a time showing on an activity. So we need some way to sort of swap that out, and or otherwise like navigate between the screens that we want. So on to the next topic, navigation. There's a couple ways, as we touched on before. There's the bottom bar where you can just kind of tab between different screens. And there's also the tab layout sort of like at the top there, which is just another, it's pretty similar, but just another way of switching between multiple screens. This one is more like, well, tab, I guess. This is strictly like stuck on the bottom as a bar. So yeah, up to really like how you want to design it. And like how they work is, so the bottom navigation is typically like the highest level of navigation. You can't really like go any higher up than the bottom navigation. If you click here, you're going to go to the profile screen and then any other screens related to the profile. If you go here, you're going to have like the list of eateries and stuff like that. Whereas tab layout, you can see it might even be like integrated in the like a smaller screen. So this you can go into like further like screens that are related to the top level screen there. So campus in College Town, those might be two different screens related to just eateries as a whole. So today we're gonna go more in depth with bottom navigation. I think for discussion, we'll probably touch on both, including the tab layout. But for now, we're just gonna try and implement bottom navigation, because I think for apps that you want to design and like apps you want to write for your hack challenge, like probably most of them will rely on some form of bottom bar navigation. So step 0, you're going to first import the Gradle dependencies. So we rely pretty heavily on Google's like material design in Android development. We don't want to like rewrite like ugly stuff. We just like want to use like what kind of works and what kind of looks good. So we just we import the material library there, and we want to import the compose navigation library as well, just so we can actually implement moving between the screens. So step 1 is creating something called a nav host. So basically, nav host is this function here that takes in something called a nav controller and specifies like a start destination. This start destination is like the first composable like function that you want to render. So you can see below, it's something called like a nav graph, this scope here. But if you want to just think about it, this is like declaring like the if you think of it as a graph, these are like the next like nodes that you can go to. So you can go to the home or you can go to like the route screen there. And then you can see like within this composable function, we actually write the actual UI like function here. So home screen and like route screen. And yeah, so this will control the top level navigation of your app. So if you put this in like your main activity, this is like where you start and where you can go from there. Step 2 is you have to define a class for the screens, which would contain a route ID for navigation, icons, and a label. So you can see here, I have something called a sealed class. Basically, this is like a special type of Kotlin class where you can specify like specific subclasses from it. So you can see like the home screen is a subclass of the generic bottom nav screen, but you have like special values that I'm passing in for the home screen. So for a sealed class bottom nav screen, you have the home screen, like classes screen, sports screen, favorite screen, and it's going to have a different route ID here. It's going to have a different like title text or like some label, and it's going to have a different icons. So here it's like these drawable like SVGs, but it can also be like some other Jetpack Compose icon. Step 3 is to sort of implement all of that in a bottom navigation composable. So Android already handles most of like the nitty-gritty for us. We just need to call bottom navigation, and then it has like an open scope here where you put in the individual items that you want to put. So you can see in this navigation, how many items do you think? Like how many different buttons can we click on the bottom there? How many do we think? 2, yeah, of course. So you can just see like there's 2 declared here, and then like I added like a comment there, add more items as needed. And then finally, when that's all done, you have to place it in something called a scaffold. So scaffold is like this top level layout that fills the entire screen and basically defines like specific locations where we can put a composable. So a scaffold has something called a bottom bar, which like where we put our bottom bar, but like bottom navigation. And then it has like a content scope here where we can just put like everything else, where I put like my nav host. So we can look at that more, but basically all you need to know is that the nav host controls like the screens that you're swapping out, and the scaffold controls like where I'm putting the screens and where I'm putting the navigation bar and stuff like that. And if you want to know more about navigation, just look up like navigation in Jetpack Compose, and you'll see like some pretty extensive like right up here. There's a lot about it, and it'll give you most of like just like the quick syntax as well. Yeah. Cool. And finally, before we get into our demo with the bottom navigation, we're going to go over some just quick like intro to networking. Does anyone like know something about like HTTP or just like any familiar with it? Good there. A little bit. Yeah. Okay. So basically the purpose of networking, like all things on the internet, is we want to retrieve data from the internet or like the backend, and we want to store like, or we can like store data on the cloud, or we want to share data with other users. So obviously like you can create an app without networking and it'll just like run offline. But um, for something that you want to do that involves like other users or like otherwise like interact with something online, like a backend server or like the cloud, you're going to want to implement some form of networking. So there are four basic HTTP requests that you really need to know. Get retrieves information from the backend. Post sends data to like the backend server. Put is kind of like think if you think of like your backend database as like a set, it's like replacing the resource with new data. And then deletes like that resource on the server. So you can see here, we have like the specs or like the documentation of each of these endpoints. So if you want to get a pet like by a specific ID, you would just use this get endpoint here. If you want to put a like an existing pet that you have or update an existing pet, you use put. Delete would delete an ID, sorry, delete a pet, and then you have to pass in like an ID to delete a specific pet. And then post, this is like uploading an image based on the pet ID. So like, like associate maybe an image to a specific pet. And then just like some information that you might want to know. So when you send an HTTP request, there's going to be a header that contains like some sort of metadata about the request. These can be like timestamps, tokens that you need to like authorize an endpoint and stuff like that. The body contains the content of the request. So it'll be something like if you're making a post, it'll be like the actual image, or like some other data that you're trying to send back to the server. And the request, I guess, can just contains the type of request. So it would be like either get or post or something like that. And then you've probably seen this before, like when you go to like a random website that's either down, you might see something, you might see a status code that starts with 500, or you might, if you go to like just a website that doesn't exist, you might see something that starts with 400, like a 404. These are all just like status codes for a request gone right or request gone wrong. So if something like good happens, like something happens correctly, it'll start with a 200. And then there's like other types of status codes, and then you have like 400 and 500 there. Yeah. So we kind of flew through it. Actually, we didn't, but I will get started on the bottom navigation demo because I think it's pretty good practice for us to continue using Jetpack Compose and then just like learning all the different types of ways to design your app. So I would like if we could just like follow along maybe. So does everyone have like Android Studio up and I can create like a new empty activity, Jetpack Compose activity there. We get there. I'm just going to go ahead and click here. And I'll say lecture 5 demo. Build for a bit. Okay, cool. So this is what the empty activity looks like. If we don't recall, remember when we first generate it, we can just kind of rip out what's already there. It's like hello world kind of stuff. And just like rip this all out. So you're just left with the bare bones main activity. And yeah, so let's first get started building out the bottom navigation. And so we're going to start with step 0 here. Import the Gradle dependencies. So I'm going to move over here, go to the Gradle scripts. I'm going to want to go to the one that says module app rather than the project one. Scroll down to your dependencies and just add these at the bottom here. So we're going to say implementation. Not right. Android X dot compose dot yeah, let me just move this back here. Okay, so that's our first one. And then we're going to write the dependency for compose navigation. So the Android navigation compose. Oops, spelled it wrong. There we go. Okay, that looks good. All right, we can sync just to rebuild it. All right, so now let's move on to step 1, which is creating the nav host. So what we can do is actually just create a new file here. Create it in the package. So new Kotlin file. We'll call it like navigation, like main navigation. And then we can make this a composable. Main navigation. And we're going to write our nav host here. So val nav controller equals remember nav controller. This is just basically like Jetpack Compose's way of remembering the state of your navigation. And you really like, this is pretty important because you're going to be passing the navigation controller to like all your screens to be able to basically access your navigation controller, like your navigation stack. So we're going to have this. We're going to go back to the slides here. We're just going to write the nav host. So nav, capital N, capital H host. And so the nav host, you can see here, basically takes in 2 parameters. The nav controller that we just created. We can just say nav controller to nav controller like so. And then it's going to take in one more, the start destination, which we can have just like as home for now. So let me import this. Okay, yeah. And so let's try and write something similar to this here, composable. I'll say we have like a home screen. Works. Composable. And then we pass in the name of the route. We can say, well, maybe we'll have a profile screen. And then we'll pass in one more. Let's say we have like an Explorer screen. This can be like something like maybe like Instagram. Cool. So now we have 3 basically like boxes where we can put our screens. Apparently nothing is going to actually show because we haven't put anything within the scope. So just for the sake of demonstration, we'll just like put like a simple text box as to represent like the entire screen. So text home, text profile, and text explore. Are we all good on that? So once we've done step 1, we can move on to step 2 from here. We're going to define a class for screens that contains the route ID, navigation ID, icons, and like a label. This is pretty important. Honestly, it's like optional technically, because we can see here we can use strings. But for larger apps, especially, I think I grabbed this from the Uplift app. Yeah. So for larger apps, you're definitely going to want to use a specific class for your screens. So how we can implement that pretty much straight away in the same file here. We'll just say sealed class, and we can call it whatever we want. We'll just call it like bottom screen to represent like the different screens that we can access from the bottom navigation bar. And we're going to say the bottom screen takes in parameters route, which is a string. We'll say it has an icon, which is an image vector. Import that. And then it has a label or title text there, which is also a string. All right. And then we're going to use kind of like the power of Kotlin sealed classes here to predefine our classes. So we don't have to like once we create the sealed class, we don't have to like create different like objects using like a new kind of like Java. We can just create them directly in the sealed class using the object keyword. So object, let's say the home screen. Home using colon, basically like type. Home is of type bottom screen. But the home like specifically has a route of just lowercase h home. We can see it's the same one down here. An icon, which is we can just say like one of the icons that Android provides. So Android default. So icons.default import this. We'll say home is one of them. Always import this. Okay. And then we're gonna have a label, which is like a capital H home. Very good. We can just copy this a couple times for our other screens. So we have a profile screen and a explore screen. And these all have slightly different routes. So it's lowercase p profile for this one and lowercase e explorer for this one. And then the labels are going to be different as well. And the icons as well. So profile, I think there's like a person icon there. Explorer, you just use like the search icon. Yeah. So we've kind of already like predefined all this stuff. You can actually go back here and rip this out so it's a little more dynamic. So let's have our screen list be a list of these objects. So we can say screen list equals list of. And how we access these predefined objects directly is just say bottom screen dot home, and this will give us the home object. So bottom screen dot home, bottom screen dot explore, and bottom screen dot profile. And you can see, it should give us a type here. Yeah, the screen list is now a type of bottom screen. Cool. So what we can do now is in this nav host, we can sort of rip this out here. Instead of hard coding it in, we'll say this is the bottom screen dot home dot route. This is the bottom screen dot profile dot route, right? Because these are all things we declared up here. And this one is the bottom screen dot explore dot routes. Yep, looks good. Okay, so now we can finally move on from this step and go to step 3, which is creating the actual like bottom navigation bar using bottom navigation. So we can also create another composable for this. So down here at composable, create a function, bottom navigation bar. You can name it whatever. Just name it something idiomatic. So we can use the predefined function that Android gives us. So bottom navigation and open bracket, close bracket here. And so inside the bottom navigation scope, you're going to write your individual items. So you can write them declaratively like this, or we can kind of leverage what we already have up here. In this list, let me make this list what side? I don't know if I can do that even, but we'll see. And we can say navigation. We'll call this list and just iterate through each of them and create the bottom navigation items based off of these like predefined schemas. So screen list dot for each, and we're just gonna like iterate over each one. For each bottom screen object in this list, we're gonna write a bottom navigation item. Okay, and then it has a couple things that we need to implement. It needs an icon. So icon equals an icon, open bracket, close bracket here, for all pass-in composables. Like this, an icon, and then we're gonna say bottom screen dot. I'm sorry. We're iterating over each bottom screen, so we just use the iterator here, it. So it dot icon. Yeah. And then I think you need to pass in like a content description. Can we just write no? No, we can't. Okay. Content description. Okay. Description. Okay. Next one, we need a selected. So we can say we'll just set this to like a random value for now, but there's actually a special way to know which one is selected. I'll get back to that later. So now we're going to need to specify an on click. So when we actually click on the navigation bar here, we want to actually navigate to one of these screens. So what we need to do is pass in the nav controller into here. So we're going to go here and say nav controller. And once we've passed it in, we can actually just use it down here and call dot navigate. And so we're going to navigate using the route ID, and the route ID is obviously specified in our class up here. So we can just say dot navigate dot it dot route. Cool. So now that's the bottom navigation bar. So we're going to move on to step 4. Finally, we're going to place all of this in a scaffold so that like the bottom navigation bar drops to the bottom and the content is like in the middle of the screen. So we can go to our main activity and kind of all piece it together. So we can say we want a scaffold like so. I think this gives you like a error here. You can just suppress that. I don't know why. But the scaffold will take in a bottom bar composable up here. And we can just say that is our bottom navigation bar here. So bottom navigation bar. And we'll need to pass in the nav controller. So I think it might actually be even better if we just move this nav controller up a step into the main activity here. So we're gonna put it here. And then we can pass in the nav controller here. And then we're going to use the same thing. Now that we've kind of moved it up, we're going to pass it into these lower level composables and use that to call it in the main activity. So if you guys remember, the nav host basically controls the content that's kind of swapped in and out on our actual screen. So we're going to put that in the like the scope of the scaffold. If you go down here, whatever is in these open and closed brackets is the content that's being swapped in and out. So we'll just say main navigation, and we'll also need to pass in the nav controller there because it needs to also have a reference to it. Yeah. So let's try it on that. Oh, missing a let's see there. Okay, fair enough. Okay, yeah. So you can see here, we didn't write any actual like content for it. We just write the text box. We can see home. Then we click on the search. It'll take us to explore. We take on the profile and it'll take us to profile there. And I believe there's actually a way to give these icons names. So right now it's just like sort of idiomatic. You can look at the icon, but if you want to actually give it a label, I think it's one of the parameters here as well. So we'll just say label equals whatever we specified up here, it.label. Oh, okay, it needs to be a text. It.label. So if you rerun this, it'll show down here. Looks pretty good. All right. And then one more thing. So we kind of glossed over this selected attribute here. There's actually a specific way to access what's like where in the navigation graph we currently are. So we have to use something called if I remember correctly, val backstack entry equals, or I remember back what was it? Okay, let me look at what it was. Double close. Let me open up the it was oh yeah, okay. It's very confusing syntax there, but it's you want to say a value by and then nav controller dot what was it? Current backstack entry as state. Current backstack entry as state. And all of that is going to basically return us the state of our navigation controller within this value here. And then so we can say the actual destination that we're at we can just say is the back stack entry dot destination. So when we go down here and say which one is actually selected, we're going to say destination dot destination is nullable. So question mark dot route, right? Because this is just our string. And whether the route equals the current route that's in the iterator, that means it's selected. So if our current state of the navigation graph equals the current bottom navigation item that we're looking at, then we know it's selected. Otherwise, it's not selected. I think if you rerun this, it won't actually change anything. But this is just like important if you actually use some logic with which screen is selected. So yeah. Let me see here. It kind of animates as well, so you don't have to worry about that. Yeah. So that is bottom navigation bar for you. My voice is shot and my mouth is really parched, so that's the end of the demo. But yeah, do you have any questions on that? Good there, any questions? All right, cool. I will post this code on the ed discussion and then hopefully the textbook. And yeah. Right. Well, that's the end of the lecture. If you guys have any questions, you can come to me or Gregor. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day. Let me stop recording.